Hello guys, I know I haven't done a video in a week, but I'm so happy and glad to be back. I went to Vegas with my mom and her best friend and Rex as well, and I've come back with such a fresh outlook on life. My guides actually advised me to start taking one day off of meditation per week because I find that whenever I step away from my spirituality, I'm a Virgo, so I nitpick everything. I need to scrutinize every aspect of everything because, in a way, that's what Source does. Source will study itself by breaking itself down into smaller and smaller and smaller fractals until it fully understands. Well, it never really does. It keeps going, every detail within different consciousness structures. So if you think about when you started doing yoga, for instance, you were just enjoying the yoga. But then as you deepened your practice, you start, identifying different things in your body or finding a new stretch or a new breath and you start going into all the intricacies. And Source is like that. Source will always find new life or create new life. And so the way that it does that is it uses us as vehicles in order to extend itself. Obviously, we have to be on board. So it's through our free will, through our volition, but we have to be on board with it extending itself through us. And then we become conduits to further creation, to further the evolution of ourselves through a singular perception, but also of the entire collective. So it's amazing how I've been receiving all these downloads about how why am I such a spiritual overachiever? Is because Source is flowing through me and I'm always reaching for more, reaching for more, reaching for more. And the deeper you go, the more details you're able to derive from your studies, because we're all scholars here. But stepping away from all of that, meaning the constant receiving of downloads, allows your bodies, your emotional body, your physical body, your spiritual body, to synchronize so that you can come back with a fresh outlook. And it's interesting, I've been doing a lot of readings since yesterday, and I'm more articulate than I was when I was downloading information or meditating 3 hours a day, because I've taken time away. I've let it air out a little bit. It's like a wine that needs to just air out and breathe. So it's amazing when we can take a break from our spiritual work, because we come back and everything is like slower. You're able to hear yourself clearer. You don't have 1,000 downloads streaming in at the same time. Your body is more relaxed. You feel more synchronized and harmonized with your higher self, with your guides. And it's a nice, comforting feeling. But anyways, the last video I shared with you guys was the entity attachments. And before going to Vegas, I received another download about that. And it wasn't a new download. It's something that's happened to me over the course of many years. But the day before I left, I went to the gym. And there was a woman doing that hip abductor machine. You guys know which one I'm talking about. The hip abductor machine. And then there was an older man that walked by the machine and stood there. She wasn't aware of it because he was right beside her in her periphery, and she couldn't see him because she was in the midst of doing her set. Well, he had a very impatient energy. Like, when's she going to get off this thing? You could sense his aura. There was like a dark mist around it. And I talked about the dark mist, or I called it the dark cloud in the other video. But it's a dark mist that surrounded him and his aura. And I saw the spirits right away. And what's fascinating to me is that I haven't been discussing these things in 7 years. When I awakened in 2011, all I used to talk about were these different entities that attach onto people, and how there's a battle between the light and the dark, and then there's somewhere in the middle where you're kind of their child and you embrace all perspective. And but I definitely used to see the different spirits, and I started studying what different entities looked like. So you have an entity of guilt, you have the entity of the people pleaser, you have the entity of shame, you have the entity of control, of aggressiveness, of passive aggressiveness, and every entity takes on a different shape. They all shape themselves differently. And when you become adept at seeing and studying other people's auric fields, then you're able to pinpoint which entity is attached to them. And oftentimes it will be many, because if the host isn't aware of what's attached onto them, that demon or that entity is going to make babies, or, beckon all the other entities to come on over because it's found a home. I remember I wrote something in 2011 about that, where if an entity finds a nest, they will send a signal or notification to every other entity that they might be in cahoots with to beckon them to come over because they found free rent. And if that particular host is asleep or unconscious, they have no clue what's going on. They know that they're not happy, and they know that they have anxiety and stress. But what they don't put two and two together with is that they have an entity that's attached to them. So when I first awakened, it was really crazy for the first 2 years because I couldn't see humans anymore. All I saw were the different spirits, angels, demons, duking it out. And then, you eventually transcend duality, and you start to understand how the darkness is sometimes light that you're perceiving as darkness. I hope that made sense. It's light that's disguised. You might perceive it as darkness because you may still have a judgment towards it. And because you still have a judgment towards it, and you hold that frequency within your field, that frequency is then going to act as a magnet to pull in more of that until you eventually clear that program from within yourself and no longer perceive it as such. So darkness is a teacher. And when we really come to recognize this, then we don't really have a lot of enemies in the universe anymore. We just have a lot of friends in the universe. And these friends give us intel. I don't have a lot of judgment in me, and I can feel that now. I did for many years. I had a lot of judgment, but because I don't harbor judgment or resentment, I don't have a lot of forces that are working against me or plotting some sort of strategy to diminish my vibrational stance. Because I very humbly have learned from both sides that if I'm still inviting into my reality something that doesn't feel good to me, could it be that I'm lacking self-boundaries? Or could it be that that particular thing or person or place that I keep inviting in is trying to show me where I'm not in congruence with my own higher self? And then I need to make an adjustment within my field in order to come to a new understanding, in order to shift myself into a different paradigm. So when we understand this, that the darkness and the light are kind of the same thing in a way, they're derivatives of source energy, and we need those polarities in order to surf the contrast. We need those polarities in order to retrace our footsteps back to the truth of who we are and were always. And so it is our inherent right to reconnect to that truth, to that full spectrum of who we are. But how can we do that if we don't have that contrast? If we're not able to further understand ourselves through these different polarities? And people say to me, well, if you only have friends in the universe now, does that mean you don't believe in demons or different entities who are pushing different agendas? And no, I do. I believe in everything. Do I attract everything? I don't, because I once attracted it and then graduated from it. And now there's nothing that that particular demon can teach me, because I understand what it brings to the table if it does attach onto me, or if it has in the past. But overall, my spiritual immune system is pretty solid. So if there's any entity out there, they probably won't even be able to see me or detect my energy, because I'm in a completely different dimension. Or another way to perceive this is they won't even dare, because my energy field is like a raid spray, and it repels any entity that might have an agenda, because I don't have agendas with myself anymore. You see, when you're trying to manipulate things, when you're trying to generate certain outcomes through a control mechanism, then you're still running that particular program of being a perpetrator. Even though you may not, even though you may not consciously admit to this, if you're still manipulating people to yield a certain result that you think would be favorable to you, when in fact you're really just blocking your access from more abundance and from more vitality and more health and wellness, then you now have that energy of manipulation in your field of resonance, in your vibratory field. And because you still have that frequency, it's now going to magnetize to you circumstances or scenarios of that likeness, that are in that likeness. So someone can't really manipulate you if you're not manipulating anymore, because you had to clean up your act and decide that you were going to level up and no longer swim in that ocean of manipulation and control and greed. And what can I get from these people, rather than what can I give. And I promise you that most masters that walk this earth have been those people, the perpetrators, as well as the victims. They've been both. But you can't be a phony when you're in the spiritual field and not have gone through any tangible experiences that caused you suffering, and then try to instruct other people if you haven't been through it yourself. So the greatest healers, the greatest light workers, are people who have studied and examined in depth the dark side, only to eventually realize that that dark side was their own darkness, that was presenting in their reality as darkness, but in actuality was disguised light, that was teaching them how to relinquish their ways, how to suspend those beliefs that are rooted in scarcity and poverty, and what can I get, rather than what can I give. Energy is a vibrational currency, and what you do with it will definitely dictate your reality. If you're a giving person, if you're generous, it will always return to you multiplied by 10, by 100. You get to decide. That's what's wonderful. You can program your field as you please. You get to decide, but you stop deciding after a while, because you're just kind of in a flow with it, and you just do the right thing. I feel called to treat everyone at the table tonight, and you do it. And sometimes you don't feel called to it, and there's a reason for that. Maybe there are other people sitting on that table who are takers, and Source doesn't want you to give to them because, again, it's mirroring back to them that you won't receive from me until you're willing to give. It's mirroring back to them that we're not going to give to you until you start giving to yourself and people around you. That's why I say never feel guilty if you don't feel inspired to treat someone to dinner, because there are always different components that tie into the equation of why you're feeling inspired to give or not. And the same goes for your purpose. Never force yourself to take action unless you feel inspired to. Because then you might be taking action, but you're actually in the wrong dimension the entire time. You're on a broken road, and you might as well just stay in your lane, integrate whatever needs to be integrated, emotions, energies, through your meditation, until you feel called to action through inspiration. So I know I digressed a little bit, but anyways, going back to this guy who was at the gym, he was standing beside this woman, and I'm able to say from the objective standpoint that that's invasive. It's okay if you ask someone, hey, when are you done? How many sets do you have? Because then you're polite enough to ask. But I always take the stance of, I'll come back because in this now moment, and you guys know I live as a dot, in this now moment, this machine isn't open, and this person could be in communion or in deep conversation with their guides. They may not be, but that's not for me to decide. They may be having a very intimate moment with themselves or with their body or with God or with Source or whatever you believe in. And as someone who's respectable or respectful, I would prefer to step away and offer them that space. That's just how I operate. It's etiquette, and there is such a thing as gym etiquette or any etiquette, yoga etiquette, whatever. You don't just stand in front of someone who's lifting a weight. They're trying to see themselves in the mirror. So I would say that that's an etiquette that you eventually come into conscious awareness of the more that you are in these different environments. And I want to share this because it's important to bear in mind that the darkness and the light are working. So if, let's say, that someone decides to stand right in front of you when you were when you were doing your set and you needed to look at your form through the mirror, if they stand right in front of you and you get triggered and you're not able to let that go, well, that very darkness that's presenting or appearing is showing you, let this go. Let it go. And then if you're able to let it go and you don't have an emotional charge, like a negative charge around that situation anymore, then you can objectively see that, okay, I can still do it if this person isn't standing in front of me. But the conscious thing to do is to not stand in front of someone when they're in the midst of doing something, or to stand beside them on their machine, just like twiddling your thumbs, like, are you done yet? Are you done? That's not nice, because the people who do this have entities attached to them. And those entities are invasive to that person's private space, even though that person in question may not be aware of this fact. And something to keep in mind is that these entities will hide in the alleyways of your energetic field. So you know how when you go out for a coffee and the street is beautiful, and then you go through the back door of the coffee shop, and now you're in the alleyway and you see cockroaches and you see garbage and you're like, ooh, this isn't so pretty. Well, that's where the entities hide, within your field, within your blind spot, within that pocket within you that I call like a dark pothole on the street. It's like a dark pothole, and they hide in there and then control you from behind the curtains. They control you. You become their puppet, and they're your puppet master. So if someone's standing beside another person the entire time, without just asking for what they need, hey, how many sets do you have left? Cool, I'll come back. And they just stand there, even though that person may have good intentions and they're just waiting around, if they have entities attached to them, well, they're still taking from that person because they're intruding on their personal space. So it's a form of encroaching upon one's territory. And we're not aware of this most of the time. But that's why I live as a dot, because by living as a dot, I'm not entangling myself with other timelines that aren't part of this now moment. I'm in such trust with my universe that I only follow that rhythmic space, or that rhythmic, it's like a rhythm that I follow. Cool, I'm just going to flow. I'm in my now moment. And if I have to stop in my tracks and get agitated that someone's on a machine, that would be self-abuse in a way. It would be a form of inflicting pain upon myself. So back to this man. Had I not been there, he probably would have stuck around. But It's important for us to understand that energies are always intermingling amongst each other within this quantum field. I happen to be on the machine next to her, and sorry, I happened to be on the machine next to her, and when I saw this, I didn't judge it because I don't judge these situations. I started observing the energy. And energy responds to consciousness. I started observing the energy. And for years, I'm talking since 2011, whenever I see a man stare at a woman's butt without her knowing, I see that as an infringement of sorts or a violation, because I don't limit it to physical. Like, he may not be touching her butt, but energetically, he's still invading her space. Is there a lesson in it for her? Yes. Maybe there's something that she might be doing that is allowing for there to be a hole in her auric field. So think of it as like a plastic bag, and the plastic bag is representative of your auric field, and it holds energy, water. Well, if you have all these holes that you're poking in your auric field, then you're going to be susceptible to energy drainage. So you're constantly draining your energy because the water is constantly coming out. Or different beings can travel through those holes and attach onto you. So maybe in her personal life, she hasn't learned boundaries yet. Obviously, we don't have control over what other people do, which is a whole other topic that includes free will and how we respond to situations that we don't have control over. Because we obviously can't control the weather, we can't control people, but we can control how we respond to situations through our free will. But I have found that whenever you have a strong vibrational stance and you're fully embodied as who you are, you attract less of these things. There's nothing that's in your blind spot that might violate you at an energetic level. So, or maybe they will still violate you at an energetic level, but because you're in a complete different dimension, they're not able to reach you. Anyways, whenever I see things like that, I see it as a violation, an energetic violation. And it's happened to me over the years where, in LA, there are a lot of gay people, and I love my people, but I've been preyed upon when I was young or stared at incessantly by older men and all of this. And I had to learn how to, I had to learn how to fortify myself from within, look at my triggers and heal those, but also recognize that something is happening just from a matter-of-factly standpoint, and that I don't like it. I may not judge it or feel triggered anymore, but I still can recognize it as an entity that's trying to provoke me, or an entity that's trying to seduce me. I'm able to see this stuff. That's our ability to track energy and to scan other people's auric fields. But it's important to remain in that objective perspective, because if you go into the judgment and you start to get angry, then you're not reading the energy precisely. You're not reading the energy from a objective perspective. So always assume that objectivity, or that neutrality is a good word, because then you're able to see things as they are, as opposed to how you're projecting them to be. Going back to the light versus disguised light. The darkness is still a teacher because it's teaching you how to amplify your light. So it may not be good or benevolent, but it's still teaching you how to expand the universal energy that's flowing through you and in you, and to expand your awareness. So because I was there, you could say that I was a catalyst. And 3 is the catalyst number. So there was the girl who didn't know what was going on, and then he's there just like fidgeting because he's wanting to get on the machine, which to me is kind of disrespectful. It's like, just come back when it's time, or ask her. So something's been happening since 2011, which is that Jesus will show up every time. And I will see Jesus show up in front of the person who has the entity attached to them. Now, Jesus, and what's interesting is I'm kind of directing Jesus, but from another viewpoint, I'm not. I'm just a conduit for that Christ consciousness, so I'm able to see what's happening at a spiritual level. But it's always been the same. It's Jesus that superimposes himself or itself, that Christ consciousness is a collective, in front of the entities that are nesting within this person's vibrational field. And the light is so potent that they have a knee-jerk reaction of receding. And then their host, that man, is then going to have almost like a Tourette's syndrome reaction, where he's like, ah! Because there's all this activity taking place in the spiritual realm, meaning whatever darkness is attached to him, which, by the way, he's meant to attract it because eventually he's going to come to an awakening. But I don't want to get too much into that right now. There's a frequency that he's harboring within his vibratory field that's allowing for those entities to be attracted to him like moths to a flame, and eventually he'll awaken as well. But nonetheless, as guardians of the galaxy, which my guides are, they teach me how to be a guardian and a protector of all things, to oversee these operations, to be able to interact with the energy, meaning I'm not infringing on his free will, I'm just interacting with the energy by observing it. And then those entities, because observance is a form of light, so consciousness is light, and if I'm bringing consciousness to what's going on, to the unseen, then those entities are going to have a reaction of receding. And then because they're controlling him, and they're not able to get that woman's energy, they're gonna be mad, but really they're gonna make him mad to then take his energy. I know that was really complex. I'm gonna repeat that. The entities are not bound to time and space, so they're interdimensional. They operate within the non-physical. So they already know me before I get there. They already know the energies. It's kind of like when I started doing readings, every once in a while, someone wouldn't show up on the call. And that's because they were about to have a breakthrough through our call, right? And the entities that were attached to them probably whispered in their ear and said, don't do the session, and started making them feel nervous. And eventually they would cancel last minute. That's how entities work, because the person has no clue as to why they want to cancel the session, because they're bound to time and space, because they're still operating third dimensionally. But the entities that are attached to them, they already know me. They already know the energy that I have coursing through my veins, and the guides that I'm collaborating with. So they're able to interact or see what's going on in the non-physical realm. If the entities see that their host is going to have a breakthrough, what does that mean? That they wouldn't have free rent anymore, right? So if they're not able to be free rent and they're going to receive an eviction notice on their door through our session, they're going to whisper and influence their host into canceling the session. So to draw a parallel to what happened the day before I went to Vegas at the gym, this man's entities felt my energy because I was watching them. I was observing them. And then Jesus superimposed in front of them, and they started panicking. Because they couldn't get my energy and the girl's energy, he got really mad. He wasn't aware that there was a spirit attached to him. He wasn't aware that there are entities attached to him that are puppeteering him in order to siphon his energy. So he literally went like, ah, like he did some crazy, he had this crazy knee-jerk reaction and immediately walked away. That reaction in and of itself of anger, which is a lower vibrational energy, fed those entities. That's how they get his energy. They make him mad. They make him doubt himself. They make him feel guilty. They make him blame himself. They make him judge other people. Now, their objective, though, is to spread that dark mist. So if I had gotten aggravated, if the girl would have gotten aggravated, they're now getting everyone's energy. Mine, the girl's, and his. He might walk away feeling good, though, and I'll tell you why. This is coming to me now. He might walk away feeling good because he managed to get what he wanted. So the entities are giving him a pat on the back. Here's a reward. Don't you feel great now? Which is what people do when they play the victim. I feel so much better now that I've vented. I feel so much better now that I've aired my dirty laundry. Do you really? Or are the entities boosting your energy so that they can then grab it again at a later date? So that happened and I wanted to share it. I thought it'd be like a 10-minute video, but he ran off. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember. He bolted. He just bolted and he couldn't handle it. So that's my message today, is to let you know that entities are needed, because once you learn the lesson that pertains to your personal evolution, then those entities aren't going to be attracted to you anymore because you've already graduated that lesson. So there's light and there's disguised light. And even though something might be dark and it shows up in your field or in your life, then that particular energy is still teaching you how to amplify your light. Amplifying your light can be as simple as setting stronger boundaries. It can be as simple as speaking your truth, as not being a pushover. That's amplifying your light. So that darkness taught you how to stand up for yourself. Otherwise, it would have kept bullying you and harassing you. So everything is needed. But we still don't, that doesn't mean we negate the fact that darkness exists or negate the fact that light, they all exist. But once you go quantum, you develop an appreciation for everything in life as different expressions of source, as different characters in the game that are needed to make this place exciting. And you give thanks for everything, because it's all an opportunity that you're being afforded to then expand your mind, your consciousness, your spirit, that universal energy that's flowing in you even more. So I love you guys so much. I hope that this video helped you. And I guess this was kind of like Entity Attachments Part 2.